Hey, everybody. So I am super excited today to have our next guest on Founder Stories, my dear friend Barend, who comes all the way from the Netherlands. Um, Barend is the founder of a company called Harver. Harver has been rated as one of the number one pre-employment assessment companies used by hundreds of the most innovative companies around the world. He has raised 43 million to date, I'm assuming hopefully more, and it was founded in 2010. I'm super excited to have Barend come join us today to tell us about his journey, his personal story, and the lessons he's learned along the way. So Barend, thank you so much for joining us.
Great to be here. Looking forward to the conversation.
Thank you. So Barend, let's take it back all the way from the beginning. Before Harvard, before everything else, before working in McDonald's, and even before college,
Yeah,
where are you from and what was your upbringing like?
pretty smooth to be honest. I grew up in Holland, in a small town in the south of Holland. In a, yeah, let's say a normal family. Father was working. He was a computer specialist for the NATO. Mother was a teacher, but mostly at home. And yeah, just a smooth upbringing, so to say.
So obviously, after growing up in a small town, you went and experienced the world. You went to university, you worked at other companies. What do you see any benefit from like growing up in a small town that has some type of like stillness and like calmness and no like pressure and all that? Like,
No, to be honest, no. For me personally, when I moved to the bigger city, and then compared to some cities in the US, Amsterdam is still, of course, a small village. But well, from Dutch standards, it's the city basically. And when you move to a big city, you discover a lot of worlds out there. I think if you grow up in a small village, you grow up in this small bubble, and there are things out there that you don't even knew that exist.
right.
When it comes to culture, when it comes to obviously also business opportunities. So looking back, no. The answer to your question is no.
So you wouldn't raise your kids in a small town.
My kids are now growing up in Amsterdam, and my son turned 9 last year. And for his birthday, I took him to an extensive trip to New York.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, and visit all kind of places in New York, and to let him experience that there is a big world out there. And in the future, he can choose not to do anything with that. So he can choose just to live in a small village, which is fine. But at least he knows there is also, for example, the opportunity to go to a university in the US and study there. And yeah, for me, for example, when I was young, it was not an opportunity. It was never a point of discussion. And yeah, I like to raise my kids with on multiple levels, with the understanding. We also do projects, for example, in Sri Lanka. We go to Sri Lanka multiple times a year. So they understand there is a bigger world out there. And based on that knowledge, later can decide what they want to do with it.
Right. And that's so important to educate the kid like that, to present the options, to show them there's a big world out there and not just a small little bubble and everything. It's really, wow.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So growing up in such a small town, which I'm assuming was a place that there was not about entrepreneurship innovation. People went to their jobs, came back home, was all about family. The kids went to school, came back home, did homework and all that. Where did you get this entrepreneurship drive from to go ahead and found companies and to go, explore the world?
I think it started basically with something negative. I couldn't handle authority very well, not from my parents, not from teachers, but also, especially when you have your first job, often you work for managers of managers in a big company, and they're not always inspirational leaders, so to say. So I really didn't, like it. And that's why also in the first jobs I had, I quit pretty early on. And and then you have these ideas of other stuff that you could do. And of course, when you're young, you always think you can do better than your boss. So why not do it yourself? And that's, how I ended up being an entrepreneur. And I think once you become an entrepreneur and you have your own business, it's going to be really hard to go back. So from there, it was, from one adventure to the other in different parts of the world.
So then tell me about some of the first companies you started and either the failure you experienced or the success you had.
Oh yeah. So the first one, the very first one was home delivery for multiple restaurants. And it was even, when the internet was not that common, especially not in Holland. So with a group of friends, we just printed these papers, and on these papers we printed the menus of all the local restaurants in the city we lived, and we started doing home delivery. We had a phone number in a house we shared, and people could call this number and they could order French fries for their children and Thai food for themselves. And it was actually it was pretty successful. If you move forward 20 years, it's like Uber Eats right now or Deliveroo, but then in an offline version.
Wow.
It was 1996, 97. So it's a long term ago.
Right. So wow, so you really, before the internet, you had this like forward-looking thinking of like, this is what's going to happen in the future.
Unfortunately not. I could imagine the way it would work in that offline reality, right? With pieces of paper that you just hand out to your neighbors and 5 phone lines to pick up the phone. Also the margins we asked, compared to, let's say, $1 or $2 to the restaurant for an order compared to what the big companies charge right now for that kind of service. I think we didn't comprehend the potential of the idea at all back then. But we had a lot of fun. And I also, one of my first jobs was literally working at McDonald's, and we made a lot of money compared to working for McDonald's. So that was positive.
Well, so you have this experience, right? So this is your first startup. And it's funny, I was actually speaking to another Danish entrepreneur recently. I forgot his name, but he's also sold quite a few companies. He's now the founder of a company called X.AI, a scheduling startup. And he said that he approaches entrepreneurship, that entrepreneurship is a career, in the sense that his career is starting innovation, founding companies, going ahead, building it, that either gets, comes to something bigger, sells it off, and then, launching the next thing. And it's a whole learning and constantly,
Yeah, absolutely. And every time you fall, you get up and you hope you learned and you do it better the next time.
Right. So how have you, over the career, so far your career of entrepreneurship and from the companies you've launched previously, and we'll get into Harver in a second, approached failure or learn from failure?
I think in 2008, I had a company that, it didn't go bankrupt, but it was not far away for it. And that was really, that was really a failure, basically. Of course, there was a financial crisis, so there was also a lot of reasons for that. What I always try to do is stay positive and still try to see what is the opportunity that is left, or what's the opportunity that's still out there if all the bad things are gone, basically. So for example, in that example, I had to let go 80% of my staff, but with the rest of the people that were left, we started a new company, which was pretty successful. So I think with any entrepreneur is, of course, optimistic, maybe a little bit opportunistic. But with that mindset, you will get through failure and get better out on the other side.
Right. Now, so how do we, a time of crisis like this, you started the other company in, the time of crisis in 2008, you had to lay off and then you kept 20% to start another one. How do you view entrepreneurship going about founding companies in times of crisis? Is it a time to bring out more innovation and everything?
Oh, absolutely. I think also in this crisis, in this Corona crisis, which is unprecedented, we will see in 5 years that some of the biggest companies in 5-year time are founded right now. Because these unprecedented times also force companies to move forward towards innovation at a speed you would normally never do. And look at traditional industries, for example, schools. I mean, it's not really an industry, but they are all forced to move to e-learning now, like overnight, forced because the schools are closed in a lot of areas in the world. So educating over video, over Zoom, over video conferencing tools. Pre-COVID, you would say, that will maybe happen in 10 years' time when you look at preschools. Now overnight, they have to do it. In our business, remote interviewing is the default standard. Work from home. Like companies that said that always said, I can never work from home because in our industry, it's impossible to go into work from home modus. Well, they have to. And they will find creative solutions. And sometimes they will discover that the creative solution to overcome this practical problem is actually a sustainable solution to do things better in the future. So I think out of this crisis, we will see a lot of disaster happening, but there will also be a wave of innovation where some companies will really prosper from.
Right. It really it really sped up the rules forward. Like you mentioned, like 5 years. It took it to a whole nother level, everything.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, so take a step back. How did you come about founding Harver? Was it an issue that you went through personally? And then what was the initial stage initial launch process you took?
Yeah. Yeah, it's like, I think like a lot of founders, it was a big coincidence in the end. It's just that you meet people with certain problems, and as a creative person, you see opportunities to solve that problem, and then the solution turns out to work really well. So in the case of Harvard, it was a friend of mine. She became CEO of a call center. She was new to the call center industry. She says, I'm hiring 800, 1,000 people a year, and 60% of those people, they leave the company within a month. And everybody tells me it's normal. It's just the way it is in our industry. And I don't believe it. And I knew her from previous projects where we did some pretty innovative stuff. And she says, can you have a look? And that's when we dived into the world of volume recruitment, looking at, why do people stay? Why do people leave? Why are people hired? Why are people fired? And we discovered there was a huge room for improvement there. And that's, led into building one product for that specific company. But it was so successful that other companies approached us asking for the same product. Well, and that's how it basically took off.
Right. So what would you say, what was like one of the challenges you went through in order to taking off building it up? Was it, recruiting that team, making sure you have product market fit? Was it raising the money?
I think if you found a company, you go through these different stages of growth. So initially it's about product market fit and making your first product work. And then you start scaling, and then it's hiring a stellar team, because you will reach the point where you have to let go basically and trust people around you. Right. And then I think when you look at, we're a SaaS solution. So as a SaaS company, you always have to invest a lot on forehand to innovate your product and to build a platform that's ready for scale. But you do that before big clients sign up. So then it's about funding and finding a strategic investor that can help you through the next stage. Mm-hmm. And then it's scaling again. So it's a spinning wheel of problems. The bigger you get, the bigger the problems, they say. But that's also what makes it really interesting.
Right. So then as a CEO, a first-time CEO of a SaaS platform, how did you personally scale together with the startup and your own growth?
I think what you say is right, that you scale with your company. So a company with 10 people in one location, it requires different skill set than 100 people or 150 or 200 people. And I think the only way to adjust is to grow with the company and enhance your skills. So reading a lot of books, listening to a lot of podcasts, talking to other founders. We have a very, very good investor that is backing us, that is also supporting us on that level. But I also realized that there could be a point if Harvard grows further and further and further, and that sometimes that happens, that you cannot grow along with the company anymore. And then it's also time to look in the mirror and move on. Mm-hmm. Luckily, I don't think I'm even close to that stage, but that can happen as well.
Well, I mean, hopefully it never happens. Hopefully you grow with the company until it goes public, and it has thousands upon thousands of employees and customers.
That's exactly the plan.
So what were some of the biggest accomplishments? And you've raised over 40 million to date. In 1995 you're working at McDonald's, and now McDonald's is a client of yours. You have multiple other things. What was an accomplishment in the sense that you look back and like, wow, we did something here. We built something.
I think one of the values of Harver, we have some core values, and one of them is dare to jump. And I think if you look at so we're from Holland, and one of the part of the Dutch culture is, don't try to achieve too much. Stay normal. That's crazy enough. It's a very famous Dutch expression. And I think what we managed to do with Harver is step out of that boundary. And for example, I think if you want to be a successful global SaaS company, you have to conquer the US. It's really important because it's the biggest market for many industries. And I think one of the things we did very well is that at a certain point, we consciously decided we are going for scale. So we're going to look for a US investor. We're going to open up an office in the US, parachute one employee over there, and start building our business on the other side of the ocean. And I think that was a big accomplishment, that we were really successful in that. And that was also a pivotal moment for Harvard.
Wow. No, that's absolutely incredible. And, you mentioned talk about values of, the dare to jump, have that boldness, not to be afraid to failure and, try new things. How do you implement um, values and culture within your company that you're actually living it, teach the rest of your employees to do it?
I think explaining why those values are important and also explaining what it means for each individual. So if you're talking about dare to jump as a value within the company, it also means that for us, if our employees, if they see an opportunity to improve something, to do something in a new way, to do something in a better way, that they should feel comfortable and that we have their back to make that discussion and that they also dare to jump. Because we strongly believe that if 10 people jump, then probably two will create like an incredible mess, and we will have to clean up that mess together. But the other 8, they will leap us forward. Mm-hmm. And how we do that is looking back at the history of the company, is sharing examples on why this was important and how it progressed us basically, but also lead by example. And especially with the dare to jump value, if it goes wrong because people dare to jump, also clean up the mess together. Don't make a big fuss about it, just learn from it and move on. Right. So I think explaining the reason, the logic behind the value, but also leading by example is extremely important.
Right. And that's absolutely incredible. And the fact that, you give that autonomy to employees to have that ability and not be afraid of what the, not necessarily the feedback of any bad feedback, God forbid, or anything retribution because of that. That's just incredible to have that type of thing.
Yeah, and it comes together with, so another value on this deck for Harver is we say always land on the right side of history. So you can jump, you can make decisions, but for us in 10 years time, if you look back at our company, I want people still to be proud. So maybe we didn't, you never know, right? Maybe we didn't make it. Maybe we didn't become the biggest one, but in 10 years time, if you look back, they should say they did the right thing and they landed on the right side of history. I don't want to end up as a tobacco firm. So yes, you are allowed to jump, but there are some boundaries there, because you should never jump into a direction where in 5 years time, we will be judged on it as being a negative activity, right. Which is extremely important, because Harver, we provide tools to make hiring decisions. We're not playing games. It's about real fundamental decisions about the life of applicants. So yeah, this landing on the right side of history is an extremely important value in every time you jump, basically.
Just making sure you have the right framework for it. So, taking, let's say 5-10 years, in the future, and looking back to now, to April 2020, what are you going to say? What are companies going to say how Harver handled the COVID-19? What is the process what have you guys done so far, for your company? And I know you've taken certain initiatives for the general, the other companies, you've done some free stuff, which is absolutely incredible. And thank you. And, what are your thoughts for post this? But let's start with the first part.
We created a framework about how we believe the stages that the world will go through in this COVID crisis, from complete confusion until we're ramping towards business as usual. I think nobody can really predict the future. So it's really hard now to look 9 months ahead. But I think in 5 years' time, when I look back, I hope that based on the information I have today, on this day in April 2020, I made the right decisions. And maybe not leading to the results that I hoped for, but in a historic perspective, the right thing to do. So for example, this example of we gave away a significant part of our platform. And in some cases, we gave it away to companies that would also be willing to pay for it, because they need it urgently right now. So there was an opportunity to make a few quick bucks, so to say. But we really talked about it, and we strongly believe that if we would give it away right now, that probably a lot of these companies would appreciate it. And then when we're back into normal business, they would continue using it and be hopefully long-term clients, instead of trying to make as much money out of the problems of somebody else. We think it would backlash later on. Mm-hmm. So I hope in 5 years, when we look back, that we say, that was the right thing to do.
Mm-hmm. Right. And then what are your thoughts post this? Do you have any thoughts about post the COVID, or how work is going to change, and also especially how hiring is going to change afterwards?
Yeah. I'm a very optimistic person, but I think for the coming years, we're going into a harsh period. I think unemployment is spiking right now. I don't think on the long term it will be as bad as it is today. What we see right now is forced unemployment because companies are forced to close.
Right.
If you look at some industries where a lot of people have jobs, like hospitality, if restaurants will reopen in a few months or weeks, let's say in a few months, they can only operate at 50% of their capacity because they have to implement the 6 foot distance regulations. So a lot of these jobs that are gone today will also be gone in 3 months and 6 months. And I think that will spike unemployment.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, we see the trend that was happening the last years towards the gig economy, where people get paid a small amount for doing a small job. In a lot of cases, it was beneficial for two parties because the employer had flexibility and the employee or the contractor could make an extra bucks because there was also scarcity on the labor market. So it was a way for them in a flexible way to make an extra buck. But I think that trend, there is a risk in the labor market that trend becomes a negative trend, that companies will utilize the methodology of the gig economy to replace or perm contract people to people just doing gigs. And if the unemployment spikes and a lot of people are unemployed, people will be willing to do that for less money. Right. So the signs of the 30s of last century, where you saw these people with carton boxes saying, we will work for food. The technology could enable companies to go back into that direction, but then in a more clean way, so it won't be that visible.
Wow.
So looking at the labor market, I see unemployment, that there is a big risk there. I think we achieved a lot the last decade when it comes to diversity and inclusion and participation of minorities on the labor market. Right. But there is also a risk that they will be kicked out first again, and that we basically lose the values we build up over the last decade. And right. That's also something, if you look at Harver, we are really looking into right now. How can we support companies in managing the overload of applicants that in some industries is already coming in, that already they have 10 times more applicants than 3 months ago, but still keeping the values that we built in the last decade. Right. So for Harver moving forward, it's an important topic.
Right. Wow. So then what can you tell other founders that are experiencing this hardship now of deciding to lay off, not to lay off, or how to save, cash to have, extended runway or anything else that they're going through the hardship?
Yeah. There's nothing wrong in laying off people right now. I think, first of all, also those founders, they are brought into a reality that nobody predicted. Even, let's say, the government of the US, this was happening in China in January already. This was happening in China in February to the extreme, but nobody in the rest of the world really took it serious. So if the World Health Organization, if global governments didn't see this happening, you as a founder, there's nobody that can tell you, you should have known that this was happening in China. You should have been prepared. If your business drops right now, so I know a lot of founders, and some of them, they make software for the event industry or the travel industry, the hospitality industry. So their business is vaporizing overnight. So you have to lay off people. I think what's really important is in how do you do it? Because in the end, you can explain to people that if you had a startup and you were aiming for 70% growth, and instead of that overnight, your business just in half. You can explain why you need to lay off people. And I think what's important is that you lay them off in a way that you really explain why, and also stay in touch with them, because things will improve in the future and they are your alumni. Maybe you need them back in 6 months or 9 months or a year, and at least you want them to talk positive about you. Right. It's a very hard decision. It's horrible for the people that are affected, but I think with a lot of transparency and empathy, you should just do it, because there is no other way. If you are a startup right now and you have to make a forecast and you're running out of cash in the next 3 months, just hoping that the world will be better by then, it would be too naive. And then, you jeopardize even more jobs.
Wow. No, that's totally true. And you see it happening, so then, the question is obviously, we spoke about it already, but how the founders make it through. But if a founder wanted to go ahead now and decided, like a new founder, you know what, I'm going to take this opportunity and to create some type of innovation, how do we go? How's he go about? What do we tell him? You know, what are the tips that you give to a new founder for them to start a new company, and especially in a time like this now?
Go for it. So now, if you have an innovation that can utilize this wave of innovation that is brought to us by COVID, so this little spark of positivity around all this negativity that's going on, if you have an idea that can ride that wave, then now is the moment. So I also invest little amounts in other startups. So one of the startups is an app that is used in restaurant for self-ordering.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're in a restaurant, you scan a QR code on your table and you can order. All restaurants in the world are now looking for these kind of solutions because they don't want the waiter to go to the table. They don't want to hand out menus that are going to be touched by a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
So they're bomb. It's innovation that, yeah, this is the moment. If you don't make it, if you cannot get market share right now, you will never get it. If you have innovation when it comes to video conferencing, to online working, there is a company called Miro that does this. That's basically a shared online whiteboard. It's booming like crazy right now. So if you have an idea like that, and you have the team and the financial measures to kickstart right now, yeah, then don't let COVID stop you. Accelerate on it. I think where you have to be aware of as a founder right now is that it's not a solution that's only valuable in this moment, because there are also founders that are starting companies right now around this crisis. This crisis, it may last 3 months, 6 months, 9 years, even maybe 2 years, but it will go, yeah, it will pass. So that's something, if you can ride a wave right now, but have something that's sustainable beyond COVID, yeah, then start.
Right. Barend, I got to know, where do you get your clear thinking mindset, the clarity that you have, sound advice, very practical. You know, what is your process, your method, you know, your own personal development way?
Yeah, I don't know if maybe my advice sounds really clear because, yeah, the future will prove whether it's the right advice or not. I don't know. You just said yourself that if you're an entrepreneur for a long time, then yeah, it's like a school, right? It's like education. So I think I went to the 2001 crisis, 2008 crisis. So I think you live and you learn basically. And yeah, a lot of founders are younger than me, so maybe it's also the bald head and the age that helps a little bit.
Right. So what personal development method do you use in order for you to grow your own personal growth?
I read a lot. It's a little bit cliche. I love to read. Yeah, about other founders but also yeah, historical figures about their lives. I listen to podcasts, obviously.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's it. So I'm not the person that goes to courses, or I was a member for a year of an entrepreneurial network, the entrepreneurial organization. It was just not my thing. So everybody learns in their own way. For me, reading is the biggest part.
So then who is someone that has made an instrumental difference in your life then, from the books you read, the podcasts, or from the people that you met?
Yeah, I think a lot of them just contribute a small part, right? It's not that you read this one book. I don't also have a book where I think, wow, this is the magical book. I also don't believe that by reading books, you become a good entrepreneur, because if it was that easy, then everybody would be a billionaire. I liked some of the pages from this book, The Hard Thing of Hard Things. Because it described really in a really good way, I think, where an entrepreneur can go through, especially in bad times. So that's a book I can recommend. Another one is a biography about the Wright brothers that invented the airplane. Mm-hmm. So, like, we are entrepreneurs, right? And sometimes we really feel sorry for ourselves because, this VC gives me terms I didn't like, and I have this staff that, you know, and that's hard, the hard life of an entrepreneur. Well, if you read that book, that's core innovation. That's guys that told the world, we're going to invent something that people don't believe can even exist. Mm-hmm. They didn't have any budget. They had this bike store, so they operated out of their bike store. There was no literature on what they were trying to invent, so they also invent the wind tunnel. Like, they had to invent the tools to invent, basically. And then, yeah, we talk about a minimal viable product. They had to build a minimal flyable product, and they went to this place. I thought it was in Arizona, where the mosquitoes were all over the place. The writer describes really good how horrible that place was. and then they get into this thing and they have to just trust that it flies, right? And if it didn't fly, you die. So that was a really nice book, and also put a lot of things that we go through as fashion entrepreneurs into a nice perspective.
They always say, it's like, when you think about it, things are not as always good as they seem, and they're not always as bad as they seem. They land up in the middle. So like, the journey that we go through, it's like, we think like, like you mentioned, the VC, we don't get the terms that we want. If we look back in a month from there, we're like, it's not as bad. Things like in hindsight worked out as well. Or if we get the terms we want, right now it's like ecstatic and we think it's amazing, but then we look back, it's like, it's not the best terms, came with whatever it may be. So there's always that middle ground over there.
Yeah.
As founders, has been a lot of times, we deal with imposter syndrome, loneliness, and not necessarily do you go through that, I don't know, but like multiple other things that come together with it that you feel like you're in this journey alone. What is your process if you go through that?
Yeah, I read it. Other people describe it that process, but it doesn't resonate with me. So also at Harver, I have they're not co-founders. They joined later on the journey, but they feel like co-founders and they behave like co-founders. So with Harver, I never had the feeling that I had to go through something, where I was completely lonely. And then, after things, you also have your investor you can talk to. Well, luckily I'm married to a wonderful woman. So at home we can talk about stuff. So I never felt lonely in that journey in the way sometimes I read other people describing loneliness, like this lonely at the top syndrome.
Right. How has married life or being married during the entrepreneurship journey and having children during this process enhanced you as a founder and your startup?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think being a founder and a CEO of a scale-up or startup doesn't enhance your marriage. It's maybe the other way around. The other way around.
Yeah.
It's more that you spend so much time on your work and I think that every dad that works a lot can relate to that you always have the feeling you're not doing enough. What it helped me was having children also gives you in one way or the other, a purpose or an extra need to be successful. Like you have to provide, right? You have to take care. And if as a parent, your mindset is that you want to offer them the world. So imagine this example of if you want to go to the university in the US, you should, but then you should also enable that, right? You cannot, everything costs money. So I think from that way, it's an extra drive to be successful. And on all other parts, I think sometimes your company needs all your attention and then having a family doesn't help. But that's maybe also a good thing because that forces you also to get your mind off your company. And that's sometimes the times when you get the best ideas. Right. My son plays soccer. So every Saturday morning, well, not now because of Corona, but normally every Saturday morning at 8 o'clock in the morning, you're watching soccer and that frees up your mind. And that's also the time sometimes you get the best ideas for the next week.
Right. No, that's incredible. And you see it enhances, especially the emotional security that you could feel from it.
Yeah.
It's interesting, Holland right now has, from my understanding, a nice amount, some pretty big startups coming out of Holland and that, Holland, Amsterdam and around there. How is the startup culture there different? And I actually think it's actually better than a place like, example, New York or Silicon Valley, where it's all about the hustle and push. And over there, it's, people, the mentality and the culture is a different type of culture. Huh?
Yeah, I don't know if it's better for all stages. So I think Holland has a huge social security system. Right. Like only if there is, let's say, really mental problems or you are, for example, are a drugs addict, then you can really hit rock bottom. But in general, it's not like the US where, if you're unemployed, the government will still pay you in Holland. So I think it's pretty easy to start a company here in Amsterdam because all the facilities are here. Like there is social security, there is cash, the legal procedures are really easy. So I think what you will see in Holland that you have a lot of startups, but also you have a lot of lifestyle entrepreneurs, like people that like the story of a startup that start, but don't want to go through the hard stuff, basically.
Right.
But then the companies that do want to go, that do have the ambition like we had with Harver, I think, yeah, there are some advantages in Holland. Education is almost for free here. So it's really, yeah, a lot of people have good education. Because nobody speaks Dutch. We all speak pretty, our English is pretty good. We can have an interview like this, for example. I think for a lot of people, for example, if you were born in France or Germany, it's much harder. So that also makes it easier to work outside of Holland and to go open up and to go to be international. And I think from a cultural perspective, Dutch people are pretty internationally and oriented, internationally oriented and open. So we can easily adapt to other cultures and other realities. And I think that helps to scale. I think what I already said before, like in Holland, there's also sometimes mentality that don't go too crazy. We are pretty risk averse. And that's why a lot of ideas that happen in the US and, for example, the Netherlands at the same time, the US company becomes successful because they think bigger and they act bigger. But the reason they do so is also because they have far much more to lose. Because if they don't grow, they're out of business. While in Holland, it's also fine to have a company with 6 people and just, life moves on, basically.
Yeah, that's interesting. You mentioned, like in the beginning, where you have like in a place like Holland, or even like a certain place in Europe, they have the whole social infrastructure in place already. And I think in the US, it's a lot about taking care of self, the individualistic type approach, as in a place like Europe, Holland, where it's a lot of it's more community oriented. What you mentioned, like, in the US, you have probably more drug use and alcohol use and addictions than you probably have in the whole Holland, and everything in Netherlands. Because you had that social infrastructure in place, which makes such a big difference in a community oriented person where people feel interconnected to each other, which, can help out in making their founder's journey.
Yeah. No, I think you're right. The approach of the Netherlands is completely different than in the US. Also, for example, everybody has healthcare here. Right. So there is a lot of equality when you are born. And I think that's also one of the biggest challenges for the US moving forward. In Holland, you can still have the American dream. Right. You will not become a billionaire. So it's not the American dream like the American dream, but the American dream of making a decent living. Right. And I think if you are now today born in the US in a poor family in a bad neighborhood, there is always a chance of accomplishing the American dream, but right. In reality, it's not going to happen. And I think, this can be challenging in the US because in the US, there is a big difference. You have really poor people and really rich people. And I think the poor people, to a certain extent, accept it because everybody still has the feeling that anybody could accomplish this and could become a rich right. person. And that also, provides safety for the people that did make it, that are extremely rich. Because, it's like good for you, right? It's people, you are allowed to be proud of your accomplishments. But I think if the US keeps moving in a direction where, basically the American dream doesn't exist anymore for a big part of the population. How long will they still accept that they are the have-nots and 5 miles further you have the haves, and if you are born in a have family, you can go to the good education, good university, and you will be rich yourself as well. And on the other side of the spectrum, there is just no hope anymore. Mom works 3 jobs at the same time, and this is also something that COVID could even make worse. And I think that's a big challenge.
Mm-hmm. And one of the positive things that we see from COVID is the fact that all these types of situations you mentioned, the different communities, all the diversity that's happening, people going up to different types of social, economic, places. It's bringing people together, making people realizing that this virus doesn't cure. You're rich, you're poor, you're beautiful, you're ugly, you're fat, you're skinny. It affects everyone, and at the same time, the way it affects everyone. This has the ability to bring us all together, to make us one community, one family, that we're all one human race here on this planet. And hopefully that continues on and everything.
Yeah, I love the concept. I don't believe in it, but I love the concept. I think that can work for a few days when a country is really in stress, right? That's also when everybody gathers around leadership again, because, it's a war against the virus. The reality, if you look at the number, is that the people that are poor and work in low cost, low paid, customer facing roles, so in grocery stores and distribution center, the likelihood that they get COVID is much higher. The likelihood that they will die is much higher because they also often have, their lifestyle is not as healthy. So they have obese, they have diabetes. So this is not a disease that will affect everybody at the same level. This is a disease that is highly discriminating.
Yeah. So then tell me, what is your vision of the future of HR tech? It's going through, I read a report the other night that, expecting to be HR tech, 3.5 billion by 2024. I mean, that's before COVID, obviously. But I'm assuming it's still going to scale. So what is your vision? What do you think of HR tech going forward?
I think we will approach the point, and when you look at HR tech in general, that sometimes technology can make better decisions than human. So we are active in the field of recruitment, and I think the component or the insights that technology can provide, for example, in a hiring process, really makes a human recruiter much, much stronger. Right. So I think if you look at HR tech, the technology will help making better decisions for people looking for a job, or better decisions for people having a job, to streamline their career in a better way, and therefore making the workforce more productive. On one hand, within a company, so making sure that people within a company are more successful, more happy, more productive, but also in a bigger scheme, technology can help, for example, with this new high unemployment rate, to make sure that each unemployed person that wants a job is connected to the best job opportunity. Instead of 10 years ago, when people were unemployed, they would apply to any job, right? Just pray and pray and hope that I get a job. So I think technology can help there. Right. So now, looking ahead at HR tech. So one part is that HR tech will become smarter, so we will make better decisions. And the other part is automation. So if technology can make better decisions, it can also automate a lot of processes that are done manual right now. So I think these are two positive HR tech trends. Right. I think the risk is on, for example, the gig economy, that HR tech can dehumanize and make trends that are not good for humanity invisible by sugarcoating it with a nice piece of technology.
Wow. No, it's amazing. Hopefully, I see these trends are heading that way, for sure there. So then, what message do we tell young Barend? He has the whole world in front of him. He could stay working at McDonald's, flipping burgers, or he could go ahead and start Harver, or he could be a farmer in a small village in the Netherlands. What do we tell him?
Move faster. Yeah. I think you can have the steepest learning curve probably in the first 25 years of your life. But you can also spend, of those 25 years, you can also spend a year having drinks with your friend and entertaining yourself, which is also really important. But I think sometimes, but that's always when you look back, I think, because then you can connect the dots and it all seems so obvious. But I think, if I would have to do it again, I would make certain steps faster, basically.
Right. And then what would be that North Star guiding light? That would be your compass, sort of like that one value that you recommend others to implement or something.
Land on the right side of history.
Land right side of history.
Yeah.
Wow. So, Barend, first of all, thank you so much. I know we were supposed to do this interview in person, but unfortunately, like what's happening in the world. But there's no doubt in my mind that once this thing passes and you do come to New York, we will meet up.
Absolutely. When the flights go, I'm going to be in the first flight to New York. I want to get back to the city. I want to see my colleagues in New York, and we will meet in person then.
Right. And it goes about saying, obviously, anything you need for your family, for Harver, please reach out. I'm here. But what most important thing is that there's no doubt people are going to learn a lot from your story and what you shared, and going to take the lessons that you applied, everything from, move faster, land the right side of history, make sure to jump, be bold. Don't be afraid of that fear, go and make sure you do it. And all the other lessons that you spoke about of your own personal journey over here, people are going to identify, they're going to learn, and they're going to apply. So really, thank you so much.
It's great to be here.
Thank you.